Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Chhoda, and welcome to this important episode of Ignition Time, folks. There's a new variant of the illness that it's actually making its way through the United Kingdom, and new reporting suggests that one of the newer vaccines is not going to protect against this new variant. So, folks, we could be in for what could be a potentially very challenging time. Let's just hope that that doesn't happen. I have a wooden desk in front of me, so knock on wood that doesn't happen. But folks, in this video I'm going to give you the latest status about what's going on, some concerns about the $1.9 trillion stimulus, the size of the stimulus, from a former US Treasury Secretary who served under a Democratic president. Yep, I'll give you some highlights of what Lawrence Summers said. He actually responded to some of the concerns that people expressed. Hey, why are you against a $1.9 trillion stimulus? And he basically said that the $1.9 trillion is okay, the amount is okay, but it should be used to create jobs, it should be used for infrastructure and not just to support income. That was his point of view. I'll be showing you that. But first, let's show you folks what's going on here. You'll see this headline on your screen. The UK variant, folks, is spreading rapidly. It's spreading rapidly throughout the country. And what's a little bit disturbing is that the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine provides minimal protection against this variant, folks, from South Africa. And so this variant is not the exact same variant that is spreading rapidly in the country, but the UK variant is. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear about the South Africa variant as well. So that's what's going on. And folks, speaking of concerns about potentially too much stimulus. You see this headline on your screen from the Wall Street Journal that says "Wrong stimulus, wrong time." Biden wants twice the spending of 2009, though the economy is stronger now. And I'll talk to you about Lawrence Summers' comments as well, and we'll hear from the current US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. Here's another article on your screen, also published in the Wall Street Journal, that talks about the risks of too much stimulus. Think about that, the risks of too much stimulus. Disposable income rose 5.5% in 2020, and this is the highest rate since 1984, largely due to the stimulus so far. So, the Wall Street Journal and some editors within the Wall Street Journal are making a case against too much stimulus. And another person making the case, folks, against too much stimulus is Lawrence Summers, who's the former US Treasury Secretary. And he actually replied to questions. And like I said, I've gone through the article. By the way, we'll provide you with a link to all these resources in the description section below. He basically said the money should be used for infrastructure. In the meantime, folks, as you know, President Biden is happy to go it alone as far as the Democrats are concerned. So, folks, a lot of stuff going on. An important individual at the center of all this is the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. I am going to show you her interview today, and there are three important highlights from the interview, and I'll be highlighting all of them for you now. Let's start to take a look at the first segment of this interview where she says something extremely important. I'm going to show you the clip, and then I'm going to break it down for you. Please make sure you watch the video all the way through to the very end, because she does make important comments that we hadn't heard before, not only in support of the $1.9 trillion stimulus, but also her comments on the targeting of the stimulus checks. Let's just jump right in and hear from the new US Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen. Let's watch right now on Ignition Time together. I'll break it down for you. Let's just jump right in.
President Biden and Democrats are pushing forward with this $1.9 trillion relief package. But as you know, one of your predecessors from the Clinton and Obama administration, Larry Summers, suggested that it's just too big. It would flood the economy with too much money, and that could lead to rising inflation. Quote, whereas the Obama stimulus was about half as large as the output shortfall, the proposed Biden stimulus is 3 times as large as the projected shortfall. Why is Summers wrong? Why are you confident this will not cause rising inflation?
Well, first, Jake, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you. I think the risks here, as Treasury Secretary, I have to worry about all of the risks to the economy. And the most important risk is that we leave workers and communities scarred by the pandemic and the economic toll that it's taken, that we don't do enough to address the pandemic and the public health issues, that we don't get our kids back to school. We have 10 million Americans who are unemployed, another 4 million who have dropped out of the labor force, particularly women who have child care responsibilities. We need to reopen our schools, make sure that children aren't falling behind, provide help. We already have way too many small businesses that are closing. We need to provide help to get them.
Folks, I had to pause and stop before I before I share my first takeaway. I had to pause and tell you that I think Janet Yellen is, as a figure, as a speaker, is extremely comforting. To be honest, I'm happy she's handling the nation's money. I don't know about you. Let me know in the comment section below. And by the way, we'll get to a super important comment she's about to make right now in the next minute or so. But she's the kind of person that, if I was sick and lying in bed, I'd want her to, be like grandma, make me some chicken soup. And she's extremely comforting. And I got to tell you, this is the right person to handle our nation's money. I know that had nothing to do with the content, but I just had to share that with our viewers and subscribers. Let's get back and pick up where we left off.
And we've already seen 1.3 million state and local government workers, first responders, policemen, firemen, who have lost their jobs, and we need to get them back on the payroll. People are on the verge of losing the roofs over their heads. The package provides rental assistance. We have 24 million adults and 12 million children that are going hungry every day, and we need to provide them with food. We have people suffering, particularly low-wage workers and minorities, and through absolutely no fault of their own, we have to get them to the other side and make sure this doesn't take a permanent toll on their lives. So we need a package that's big enough to address this full range of needs. And I believe that the American Rescue Plan is up to the job. My predecessor, has indicated that there's a chance that this will cause inflation to rise. And that's also a risk that we have to consider. I've spent many years studying inflation and worrying about inflation, and I can tell you we have the tools to deal with that risk if it materializes. But we face a huge economic challenge here and tremendous suffering in the country. We've got to address that. That's the biggest risk.
And as you noted,
And folks, so that was the big takeaway. This is super important, everyone. We heard the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen mention for the first time that inflation was a risk that had to be considered. So, folks, this is a big package, and this is a double-edged sword. And Larry Summers' number one concern was this could lead to inflation. Now, folks, I don't want to get too technical with the definition of inflation, but in short, there's a fear that the value of the U.S. dollar, the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar might reduce. Let's say you spend $100 to buy some groceries. Next year, you'll have to spend $102 to get the same amount of groceries. The year after that, in 2023, you'll have to spend $105 to buy the same amount of groceries. Now, also, I think the thing that is encouraging is that Janet Yellen, Secretary Yellen, did say that the U.S. has the tools to deal with inflation. So that is something that I feel we should be encouraged about. So she did say, yep, inflation is a risk that has to be considered, but we do have the tools to deal with it. So, folks, whoever is criticizing the large rescue plan, including many Republican senators that I have highlighted elsewhere on our channel, I think that we have the tools to deal with it based on the words of the U.S. Treasury Secretary Yellen. Let's get back to the second big takeaway. Listen closely to what she's about to say now, and I'll break it down for you as well. But listen closely to the second major takeaway during this interview with Secretary Yellen. Let's pick up where we left off.
Falling, and that does not take into account the millions of Americans who have left the labor force completely during the pandemic. I think 400,000 or so in the latest jobs report just gave up looking. After the Great Recession, it took almost 7 years to get employment numbers back to where they were. How long do you think it will take now to fully recover all the jobs we lost during this pandemic, including all the people who are jobless and have given up?
Well, the Congressional Budget Office issued an analysis recently, and it showed that if we don't provide additional support, the unemployment rate is going to stay elevated for years to come. It would take till 2025 in order to get the unemployment rate down to 4% again. We would have a long, slow recovery like we had after the financial crisis. But this package is going to really speed recovery. And analysis by Moody's and economists at the Brookings Institution show that very clearly, that we will get people back to work much sooner with this package, and that's really critically important. There's absolutely no.
So folks, hopefully you caught that. This is very significant. She said, the U.S. Treasury Secretary said that if we don't take action now, it could take several years to get back to normal. And it's important to take decisive action now. Folks, this is very important. This is coming from the top. This is coming from the U.S. Treasury Secretary. And what she said here is very significant. And essentially, she's acting on behalf of President Biden to try and convince as many Republicans as possible to try and support this package. So super important what she's saying. It'll take much longer to recover if we don't take action now. Let's resume.
Why we should suffer through a long, slow recovery.
Do you have a timeline, though, for full reemployment?
Well, I would expect that if this package is passed, that we would get back to full employment next year.
One of the main discussions right now in the legislation is about who should receive the direct payments from the stimulus package. Almost every senator agreed with the resolution.
Folks, before we get to the targeting, and I'm surprised that the host just glossed over something super significant that Secretary Yellen just said. She said that we could get back to full employment next year. This, folks, I know that next year seems like a long way away because we just started 2021. But folks, to get back to full employment is something that many of us, even now think is unimaginable within the next year. But she said that if we get the full $1.9 trillion package, we'll get back to full employment next year, which, guys, we'll take that at this moment in time because some of us have lost our jobs permanently. I have done another video today talking about the problem with permanent unemployment, long-term unemployment, individuals who've been unemployed for 6 months or more. People need to get their jobs back. Let's get back now to the question of targeting. And you'll notice the interesting way in which Secretary Yellen answers the question. Hopefully you pick it up, but I'm here to break it down for you. Let's hear directly from Secretary Yellen, and then we'll analyze some important comments about, the top money person in the United States of America. Let's resume.
On Thursday, to say that upper income taxpayers should not get direct payments. They did not define what constitutes an upper income taxpayer, which maybe is why it was so easy for them to pass it. What do you think the cutoff should be? 50,000, 75,000? Where do you come down?
Well, President Biden is certainly willing to work with members of Congress to define what's fair, and he wouldn't want to see a household making over $300,000 receive these payments. But if you think about an elementary school teacher or policeman making $60,000 a year and faced with children who are out of school and people who may have had to withdraw from the labor force in order to take care of them and many extra burdens, he thinks, and I would certainly agree, that it's appropriate for people there to get support. So the exact details of how it should be targeted are to be determined, but struggling middle-class families need help too.
So you definitely think higher than 50,000 per individual, but you're not necessarily willing to commit to 75,000 is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think the details can be worked out, and the president is certainly willing to work with Congress to find a good structure for these payments.
So the Washington Post editorial board is...
So folks, before we get back to the rest of this interview, and that's the final segment of the interview, this is very important, and this wasn't really explained here. It is not up to the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen to decide the income thresholds, but her opinion on the income thresholds is indeed very important because keep in mind the U.S. Treasury is who essentially spends out the money. The Federal Reserve is who essentially lends out the money at low interest rates. So the U.S. Treasury will essentially work with the IRS to disseminate all the money. But Janet Yellen can have an opinion. But at the end of the day, this is up to the president, who remains firm and tries to convince Republicans to go along with a certain income threshold. And I think the key individual who is sort of playing a role in initiating this entire discussion is Joe Manchin, the conservative Democrat from West Virginia, who actually, said that there needed to be better targeting of the money. And by the way, he's not a proponent. He's not in favor of the $15 an hour minimum wage, which President Biden basically said is not going to pass through budget reconciliation. So this is super important. Let's take a look at the other major takeaway from this interview as we get into the final segment of this interview. If you're learning something new from this video, please give me a like, please subscribe, please enable notifications. Let's look at the final segment of this important interview and this major takeaway that we are about to hear right now from the U.S. Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen.
A bipartisan deal. They wrote just yesterday, quote, Biden should exhaust the possibilities for compromise on COVID relief. But President Biden has also signaled he's ready to move forward without Republicans. Is the administration willing to pass this relief package with 0 Republican votes in the Senate, 0 Republican votes in the House?
President Biden is strongly committed to working with all members of Congress in order to try to craft a package that addresses the needs of the American people. And as you know, he's met with Republicans who are interested in working with him to craft a proposal. The details of the package certainly can be negotiated over to try to craft something that's broadly acceptable. But we need a big package, and we need to get this done quickly. And those are things that the president is really committed to. So he wants to make sure that all the needs of the American people are addressed. It's important to extend unemployment insurance. It's important to have enough money to distribute the vaccine, but there are many more needs out there. And he wants a package that addresses rental assistance, so people have roofs over their head, food, that they have enough to eat, and the full range of problems facing Americans.
You met with regulators from the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Federal Reserve on
So,
Thursday.
folks, during the rest of the interview, Janet Yellen talks about the GameStop situation. I'll provide you with a link to this entire incredible interview that was conducted today, this morning, in fact, in the description section below, along with all the articles, all the stories I referenced earlier. So, folks, as you can see, this is the big takeaway, that the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is completely 100% on board with President Biden's plan of extending unemployment insurance, sending out the stimulus checks. You did notice that she was a little bit vague about the targeting. You know why? Because it's not in her hands. It's simply up to Congress, specifically members of the Senate, to come up with some sort of an income threshold. So let me know what you thought in the comment section below. This is significant because one thing we can be sure about: as soon as the third stimulus bill is passed, the American Rescue Plan, or a version of the American Rescue Plan, you can be sure that the U.S. Treasury Secretary will quickly send out the money, because she 100% recognizes the need for more funding for vaccines, for more unemployment insurance, for the stimulus checks to help those who need it the most. This is encouraging. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. One more time, please click like, please subscribe, please enable notifications. I would greatly appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.